Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the fall of the Babylon Bee, and I guess it's more of a provocative title than I thought it would be. Fall of Babylon is a subject in the scriptures, but in this case, Babylon Bee has been a very prominent satire site in Christian circles, very evangelicalism, mainstream type of outlet that's caught the attention of some high rollers, mainly Elon Musk. And I do got to say, uh, I kind of put in the thumbnail and I led with it on the announcement of this live stream. I want to make clear Justin Peters was absolutely right about Babylon B. I think he was ahead of the curve. And I think what he said was related to the issues that we're seeing with the Babylon Bee this year. I think it's entirely related. I think the Babylon Bee getting star-stricken in an interview with Elon Musk is entirely related to them going after Joel Webbon, them defending, people who kill their own children, them defending or not mitigating, but still, it's still immoral to do that. And it's entirely consistent with they want to maintain 1990s liberalism in the United States. So I think it's entirely related. And I'm going to kind of open up with the thesis, if you don't mind, and a little bit more of a monologue in a way, because this is entirely related. Elon Musk is a nice barometer, and I've said this for a while. He's a nice barometer for normies. He is the normie barometer in many ways. And when you see Elon Musk move on an issue, that's a good indication of how the normies are feeling, because Elon Musk, even though he's a cultural elite, he is sort of a man of the people in a way. Similar to how Trump is also a man of the people in a way. Working at McDonald's.
A technocrat Caesar.
Yes. So, and I don't know who came up with that term. So when Babylon Bee did that interview with Elon Musk and they jokingly didn't share the gospel with him and, made fun of mega churches while themselves embodying the criticism of mega churches that they were doing, it was endemic of they want to be liked. The people at the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, Joel Berry, just to name a few names, because those are the two names we're going to talk about most tonight. They want to be liked. They love the fact that Elon Musk likes them, and they do not want to risk Elon Musk's affection. They do not want to lose the affection of the king. So that, to me, has been to their detriment. I think what Justin Peters said, back in, was it 2022? I just had it pulled up. What Justin Peters said about the Babylon Bee back in January of 2022 is pretty much ahead of the curve. And they want to be liked by Elon Musk. So people like Joel Webbon got to get out. People, to the right of them, essentially, people who want to discard the post-war consensus need to get out. People who want to discard Zionism need to get out. People who want to discard classical liberalism need to get out. And it's one thing that's very important to note about the Babylon Bee. They've been given a lot of credit for not having any sacred cows. They do have one sacred cow, and that's Jews. They don't ever make fun of Jews. They make fun of all sorts of types of Christians, and I'm fine with that. They make fun of Muslims, and I'm fine with that. Atheists, and I'm fine with that. You never see them make fun of Jews, though.
I mean, Hindus, even with the Vivek Ramaswamy working at the 7-Eleven, which that is funny.
They have ground rules for what they are and what they aren't willing to make fun of over at the Babylon Bee. So they do have sacred cows.
Well, they do have golden calf.
Yeah, exactly.
A singular golden calf.
So they're not exactly people who will just make fun of things for a living. And here's the thing about Babylon Bee. I don't read them regularly. They occasionally make hilarious jokes. Now, Stephen Wolf said you mostly make bad jokes for a living to Joel Berry, but I'm going to flip that in a positive light. I'm going to say the same thing, but positive. You occasionally make hilarious jokes. But at the same time, like, the people behind the Babylon Bee, they're not with it. And Joel Berry on the issue of abortion, very clearly not with it. And I think Seth Dillon is, again, they're too liberal. in my opinion. They want to hold on to the last vestiges of liberalism. I think that's to the detriment of the Babylon Bee, and I also think that represents the level of influence that they really can't be afforded in evangelicalism. So those are my opening thoughts. Your opening thoughts or your reaction to my opening thoughts before we kind of dive into
I mean, yeah, the Zionism being the sacred cow. I don't know if they even make fun of like a Soros joke, because again, even the mention of like a George Soros used to be taboo in the media until maybe, and this would be, I guess, Tucker Carlson that shattered that Overton window of being able to just talk about Soros. But so there is a sacred cow with regards to Zionism, Jews, things like that. Obviously, they are the Judeo and Judeo Christianity, so that's been wrought with weaknesses. And I try to categorize like your top five, let's say like top five threats facing the church. And obviously, I still think feminism is this year's number one. But if you're looking at like issues like critical race theory and like the rainbow jihad, like those two issues have kind of gotten weaker this year compared to previous years. So, and I do think Zionism is a rising threat in the church. I don't think it eclipses feminism, but I do think it is probably a top five.
Okay, and what else would be, because obviously people like Steve Lawson made an entire career on the issue of easy believism.
Yeah.
G3 is trying to make a thing out of cessationism versus or charismaticism. They're trying to make that, a top five issue. So it's not super easy to come up with a top five.
Well, I mean, the top three, yes. But
yeah, I think the top three of critical race theory,
but what are those
side
other?
B theology, or side A even, and then feminism would be your top three in most given years these days. But
And again, they rotate. But
but
obviously, feminism's clear number one this year. I
and I
do
might
think,
add this to the Evangelical Dark Web about page that, I want to be a Christian media organization for Christians that doesn't take Jewish money, that doesn't take Islamic money, which is a rising concern in media, by the way.
yes,
Islamic money.
Sneeko and
People like that. The Arabs are putting a lot of money into media, and you got to be mindful of that. So I don't really care about the Russians. People care about that, but Russians aren't good at propaganda. It's just a fact. But you got to watch out for, the Judeo or the Islamic money that could, I don't know, but Islamic money influencing Christian media yet, but that is a thing in conservative media so far. And also, obviously, the Zionist money. I mean, I did an article on All Israel News last week and how they're just peddling a lie. And you look at their advisory board, they got some heavy hitters on that advisory board. So, anyway, I wanted to.
and I did want to comment on the
Okay.
Starstruck thing of like, yeah, they do, since they've kind of gained a lot of legitimacy in the last couple of years. Like before, they were kind of a novelty, but I don't know if it was exactly when they got booted off Twitter the first time, or maybe that was after the Musk interview. But around that time, they did gain a lot of legitimacy, and obviously they have their legitimacy, so they want to maintain it. So it's like they kind of they have a kingdom, a little fiefdom, so they want to maintain their little big fish in the small pond of Christian satire. So that gets them a lot of access. I mean, I'm sure they have access to everyone else in Con Inc., as well as top celebrities like an Elon Musk.
Right. So before we dive into that, I do want to say, hey, Winning Not Winsome is my book, 10 Commandments of Spiritual Warfare. I do actually talk about Babylon Bee and quite favorably in the article, in the book, by the way. So I just wanted to give a full disclosure that my opinion has changed since I've written the book. But what I do talk about is how, they make jokes and I talk about not being nicer than God. That is commandment 9. Thou shalt not be nicer than God. And I talk about the Babylon Bee as an example. I talk about the sermon ministry for the most part as an example, and how it's more effective to use barbed pens than feather pens, if you understand my point there, quite literally. So the idea is that we should not be focused on trying to be nicer than God. and you can use satire, and a bunch of other tools are at your disposal. Things that are not sinful are at your disposal. So I do give Babylon Bee a favorable mention in my book, but just full disclosure, but it is in my book. So anyway, you should check it out, linked on the description below. And but now let's get to Elon. Let's get to the Justin Peters video as soon as I share screen. So Justin Peters published this back in 2022. Make sure we're on that HD. All right, so here's the clip.
I'm going to share the gospel, then don't call yourself a Christian. Do God a favor and don't call yourselves Christians. Now I know I sound harsh and worked up, but my goodness, do we believe these things or not? I do. Ray Comfort does. Lots of us do, but my goodness, I will never again share anything from Babylon Bee. If I even see anything from Babylon Bee again, I don't care how funny it might be. For one thing, I'm not going to read it, but if I happen to catch one of their headlines, I'm not sharing it ever again. Not as long as you claim to be Christians. Now, if you just claim to be some secular, satirical thing, fine. But if you're going to call yourself a Christian ministry, then I expect you to actually share the gospel, especially when it's so easy to do so and such a perfect opportunity. Elon, if by some chance you are watching this video,
All right, so that's the clip from Justin Peters 2 years ago, canceling the Babylon Bee. I think it's aged pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because again, the Babylon Bee in question basically had Elon Musk, and they're just like, "Ah, you're 70% there," and they kind of like laughed it off in a sense of how Elon received the gospel, or like that was the context.
I mean, Elon Musk is very smart in some areas, and he's very stupid in other areas. And I think religion's one of the areas where he just, like when he talks about it, he just sounds stupid. And I already have to listen to Elon Musk speak at like 1.5 speed, but which mitigates how bad he kind of sounded. Like when he was talking with Jordan Peterson and how painful that conversation was. It
Oh,
was pretty evident, but he was still better than Jordan Peterson, actually.
well, but again, he doesn't want to talk about religion in many cases. Like he obviously didn't want to do it on like with Peterson, and we did that live stream where he's very disinterested in the conversation, and he's just kind of like, yeah, I guess that's the case because Jordan Peterson's literally bringing up obscure Babylonian religion that maybe Musk does know, or maybe he doesn't know anything about because Musk lives in like the current day and age, and he's thinking about colonizing Mars and space travel, Neuralink, and all these other things. I mean, he has a lot to say about human consciousness, I think, and basically how technology integrates with humanity. But obviously, you don't necessarily go to him with religion. And even the gospel presentation that they should have given didn't have to be like overly long. I mean, you can give a gospel presentation in a minute if you truly tried. Like,
Yeah, and you can even use it in the form of a question. So there's a lot of ways that they could have gone about it. What are your thoughts on Jesus? 2 minutes, stuff like that. But anyway, let's kind of fast forward to the more recent controversy surrounding Babylon Bee, which has been ongoing for a while. Let me just pull up my stuff on it. And it kind of starts with this clip from Right Wing Watch that's made all sorts of the rounds. So let me pull it up. Right Wing Watch. And it's about Joel Webbon. Now, Joel Webbon's been very popular on Right Wing Watch. They go through his sermons, they go through his podcasts, they go through all sorts of things with, involving things that he says. And they're looking to make him sound bad but they've been a huge career boost for him, I would say, because they make him they get some of his best stuff. So this is a clip that kind of set off this recent round of controversy. You're able to see it, right?
And if that were to occur, and the just penalties were to be enforced, you, the false accuser, is now put to death, and that's a public death, it's a public sentence, publicly carried out, then the citizens of these United States of America, you know what they would do? Hashtag Me Too would end real fast. How do you, false accusing? Playing the victim when you're actually not? Like, you know how to end that real fast? All you have to do is publicly execute a few women who have lied. And if that were to...
So in the Bible, there is there's a part in, I believe it's Exodus, where it talks about false accusers get the penalty that they sought on the person they falsely accused. So in the case of, forcible penetration, we'll call it that for YouTube's sake, death for death. What he said was actually fairly biblical. And again, it's this 35 seconds of a sermon that was probably
and you
making
can
that
tell that they clip out the first. They clip out what he said. Yeah, they do completely clip it out of context. But even you can tell he's doing eye for an eye, that if you reciprocation, that the crime that you accuse someone of doing, you should pay the penalty of if you just make it up.
And he's obviously talking about the R word. So,
and obviously he probably said that, said people, the rapist should go and be executed for their crimes. And then, but he's also on the flip side saying if you falsely accuse, then you suffer the same consequence.
So Babylon Bee did not take kindly to this, by the way. So Joel Berry, who's the managing editor of the Babylon Bee, he says censorious wokeism has given fuel to immature boys who lack wisdom and self-discipline, who mistake careless, shit posts is what he's saying. And he wants to censor it, even though we all know what he's saying, for the mouth of bold truth telling. And then he continues, Webbon is probably a fun podcast guest, but he's not smart enough to make the ironclad point that can't be misunderstood. He'll change the culture. He'll never change the culture or move the Overton window. And I don't think he's dangerous to anyone except the people who have placed themselves under his pastoral authority. Whoa, huge accusation there. There's also something strangely womanish about this. This level of cattiness towards women is something you typically only see from other women. So then he just tries to pile that on. He's trying to attack that as well. So anyway,
yeah, that's a lot
to use censorship to censor a word there. That's kind of effeminate in my mind.
That's kind of a lot to pack. That's kind of a lot to pack into a 35-second clip, in which again, I'm sure Joel Berry's seen other Joel Webbon clips, and
the guy's, classical liberal. He's not going to like Joel Webbon regardless. He'll never. He's not smart enough to make an ironclad point that can't be misunderstood. That's not a legitimate criticism, because people have low media literacy.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. You can say something clear as day, and there's still going to be some tard on the internet that's going to misunderstand you.
I mean,
I'll just use this channel as an example. I did an entire video talking about, the Steve Lawson scandal, right? And how the woman went to MacArthur's church, Grace Community Church, and was in MacArthur world. And I was saying that people want to make this about John MacArthur, even though John MacArthur has no moral accountability for the actions of this, person that's slightly younger than us, swiping right on 68-year-old men. He has no moral accountability over that. And people want to drag MacArthur into Steve Lawson's sin. And I said not to do that. You know how many comments I got saying, how dare you make this about John MacArthur? How dare you drag his name through the mud? How dare you accuse MacArthur?
I'm sure by the time we discussed, did you do that in the original video or after the Julie Roy's article, which basically did?
It was after the Julie Roy's article.
So that narrative was already spun.
It was. But the fact that it was, becoming more evident that she was in MacArthur world, she was not entirely rando, like Phil Johnson tried to kind of red herring that. Yeah, people wanted to drag MacArthur into that. I said that's not cool. So there's literally, I made that abundantly clear in that video, and people still hate in the comments section because they didn't actually listen to what I was saying. So it doesn't matter. You could say the sky is blue, and then someone's going to misunderstand you. That is how,
I mean,
dumbed down the
we're literally doing
population
the
is.
good people on both sides. Donald Trump.
Yes, Donald Trump, very famous example. Charlottesville. So the next sentence he says, he'll never change the culture or move the Overton window. I actually disagree with that. I think Joel Webbon's doing a fantastic job this year. And in fact, he's driving the conversation in reformed evangelicalism right now.
I mean, in many cases, he's pushing out the influence of a Doug Wilson and kind of replacing Doug Wilson despite being decades younger.
Him and Andrew Isker. And in fact, they're also doing a recent series that's mostly behind their paywall now about a certain country in the Middle East. So they're driving the conversation in the culture, in this subculture, I should say. And that's going to have downstream ramifications. So I disagree with that because, again, we're already seeing Joel Webbon, maybe his camp. I don't know how to define his camp, his brand, but, people from Ogden, people from Moscow, people from, Georgetown, Texas, they are pretty much driving the conversations in evangelicalism.
And if you look at his conference next year, I mean, he's got Dace going in there. He's got Stephen Wolf. He has Arm McIntyre, I think, is also going to his conference.
John Harris.
So he is pulling from multiple different streams.
I'm looking to go to that conference next year. So, and I don't go to a whole lot of conferences. I've maybe gone to 2. So with that said, I don't know if you had anything else to add about the Overton window.
No.
I don't think he's dangerous to anyone except the people who have placed themselves under his pastoral authority. So he's saying that he's basically a false teacher.
Oh, I honestly thought he was going with the Julie Royce point and saying that he was an abuser.
Okay. Multiple ways to understand that, but
well,
I don't think
but that's essentially what
his point.
That's essentially where he's going. Like he's dangerous to the people under his spiritual authority. He's basically calling Joel Webbon an abuser, a spiritual abuser. He's essentially echoing the same exact language that a Julie Royce type would echo.
Let's remind people why Joel Webbon's famous in the first place. 2020, he left his church and then founded a church, and over the issue of lockdowns. And he's pretty much one of the only pastors to publicly repent for his part in that. That's basically why he's famous. He rode the issue of COVID accountability in the church. That plus Christian nationalism are the 2 reasons why he's famous. I don't know how many subs he has right now. I believe when he came on last year, so 2023, we did an interview with Joel Webbon. He had like 24,000 subs at that time. I think he has at least double that right now.
I thought he's tripled.
Oh, really? He's crushing it. He is crushing it. And that, you know what? More power to him. More power.
Like, doesn't he have like 100,000 subs?
May his house increase. And because, and this is where we get very petty, is that we don't have an entrepreneurial mindset. We think market share and not market size. If these people are encroaching on my turf, when it's really, you want a larger market. Care less about market share and more about market size. You want the demand for niche Christian subculture media to be larger, not your market share in this niche to be greater. So just some things to keep in mind. And so a lot of people get, petty turf battles. G3 got themselves into petty turf battles with people like people in the Christian nationalist camp.
No,
And a lot of that,
John Harris as well.
yes, and a lot of that had to do with market share. They're so focused on market share and not trying to, grow your audience organically and grow evangelicalism, evangelize, so to speak. Convert more people to your audience listeners and share the gospel with them. There is 116,000 is how many subs he has. Amazing. So just my thoughts on that situation. I see that we have a lot of viewers. Do also hit the like button. I think that helps with live streams. I don't think it helps with video views afterwards. The best thing you can do for video views, though, is to subscribe if you are new. Guarantee I can show you all the screenshots in the world of what I see on the back end. That is the best thing you can do to help out a channel, is new subscribers. Anyway, that is the context. So do we want to talk about his catty comment at the end about Joel Webbon being catty? Because again, I think that this is a clip taken out of context. I think the point is about scripture and the idea of the false accuser faces the penalty of which they falsely accuse. And then, he makes a very pointed, conclusion at the end. Yeah, this will end real quick if we make an example of a few women. And I think Joel Berry is not okay with female accountability.
No, he's like, that's very womanish of him, if we're just going to be honest. I mean, again, there are legitimate criticisms to be had of Joel Webbon. I mean, there was the joke out there that it's just like, welcome to my, podcast. I'm your host, Joel Webbon, and here is my guest, also Joel Webbon, because, the joke is that he talks over his guest. Like, I mean, and he owned the joke at the time, and that might be that's. And
I've made fun of him for that too. But yeah, that is a legit criticism.
And perhaps even in his own sermon, when he's making a point like this, he would actually be better served by keeping it as brief as possible. Just say it like with conviction and move on. Like sometimes you don't need to expand on a point.
What's the standard for saying it with conviction and moving on? 35 seconds?
I mean, he could have done it in 20 seconds. So we can shave off a good 10 to 15 seconds from that point.
There was a dramatic pause in there or two.
So
let's see. This is Joel Webbon's response. He says, I get protesters at my house, voicemails filled with cursing and perversion left on my wife's phone, and emails threatening the safety of my children. But the thing that truly does discourage me is discovering again and again how many conservative, scare quotes, Christian leaders won't even hesitate a moment to promote / retweet a leftist organization that watches all my sermons / podcasts and clips them out of context rather than siding with the clear truth of scripture. And he has like an asterisk on this. So I guess this is like an addendum to what he was saying, a footnote. If you're a Christian, you don't have any obligation to publicly defend me, but you really don't have to give the leftists extra mileage at the expense of your brother in Christ, merely to assure all your followers that you're wise, mature, and reasonable. That's something that I would only expect to be, B-E-E, done by a pagan in Babylon. So that's clearly a reference at the Babylon Bee at the end there. And I actually agree with him. Like, this is the whole, friends enemy distinction that is widely talked about, no enemies on the right. It's all about, who do you go after? Who do you spend your time going after? And there's only a limited amount of time in the day. And to be honest, I'm not going to go after people on my right flank, if I have a right flank. If there's even anyone on my right, I don't feel the need to go after them.
Yeah, much better things to do.
But the people at Babylon Bee, that's not the case. And obviously they want to make this about, certain National Socialist German Workers' Party, which we'll get to in a minute. But there's a lot going on with this issue in general. We're actually strangely going in chronological order with this controversy. So then I want to highlight Nate Fisher's tweet because he weighed in on the situation. And he says there was a class of influencer who rose rapidly in the last decade and served as bridges of a sort to the new paradigm. They had some interesting critiques of legacy ideas, but remained mostly within the post-war consensus. Now they're losing influence as they are forced to confront real conflicts between the legacy regime and challengers, and often handle these poorly. Example, Peterson. And as the people look for a deeper positive vision. So basically, Jordan Peterson has long been pretty liberal. Cernovich, who's kind of gay, tweeted the following of Jordan Peterson's record of being wrong on Brett Kavanaugh, Mike Pence, and a few other subjects.
I don't get the grilled by Rogan thing is weird, but
yeah, it was a weird take.
I don't mind if Rogan grills Trump. I think Trump can handle it, and I think it would be
I know Kamala couldn't handle that.
Yeah, I mean, she can't even handle 20 minutes with Brett there. So,
assuming that the Joe Rogan experience is about getting high and doing the interview, I mean maybe that's her best chance.
Joe Rogan's just going to ask about UFOs and who built the pyramids. Like, he's not going to ask a whole lot of intelligent questions.
I mean, he'll give you the chance to make an intelligent statement. Yeah. I think Donald Trump Donald Trump would slay that interview, I think. Because Donald Trump's he's actually been taking this campaign seriously the last few months, or the last several weeks at this point. I'll give him September and October. He's been seriously campaigning, and it's had results. But back to Joel Berry, who responded to Nate Fisher, who didn't actually, tag Joel, wasn't necessarily talking about Joel, but definitely made it about Joel, got in there and made it about him. Nate's talking about the Babylon Bee and Daily Wire, among many others. The idea is we were useful 5 years ago as effective critics of wokeness, but we lack the conviction to take the right where it really needs to go, namely the rejection of Zionism, classical liberalism, and the post-war consensus. I want to stop right there and say 5 years ago is 2019. I do not think that they were effective critics of wokeness in 2019.
Well, let's just go back there. I mean, if you look at the culture at that time, it was the own the libs, point out how absurd they are, go undercover with like Steven Crowder as like in drag or whatever he wants to call it. Like,
actually, like, to Steven Crowder's credit, he was doing the Ask Me, or not the Ask Me Anything. He was doing the debate, change my mind segments.
Yeah, debate culture. Like, that was still kind of a thing. I think 2020 was the end of debate culture. And, too bad for people like James White. But so that was the culture, I think, that Nate Fisher is at least trying to give some kind of, like, I don't say credence to, but kind of being like, hey, these guys did this, but they weren't doing enough to establish a positive vision. All they're doing is pointing out the absurdities, owning the libs, pointing out how ridiculous it is. But again, at the end of the day, you don't win people with a vision of like libertarian utopia of everyone's their own island. And
here's the other major change, because 2019, we all thought, hey, the Constitution is a solution. And that's kind of, there's a near unanimous consensus on the right. If we just Constitutioned harder, it would work. Then 2020 comes around, and you know what? The Constitution didn't do a thing.
Or
maybe it was taking a dump.
Yeah, by the time it arrives, it's like, okay, the Earth went around the sun another time. So
yeah, it's like, well, that didn't do anything to stop inflation or people's businesses from being destroyed and people from losing their jobs. A company I used to work for went out of business. Now, I'm not very sympathetic to them because they were dirty, but, just saying. A lot of businesses had to restructure. and some not for the better, especially in the restaurant industry.
Restaurant industry still,
it's still a mess.
Yeah.
You want to take your girl somewhere expensive, try a Five Guys. Or, the joke was gas station or grocery store, but, I'm making it a little bit more applicable to
the joke is that after, Trump did his shift at McDonald's, Kamala wanted to do one at Five Guys.
Yeah. It's more expensive. Definitely expensive.
There's your article, Babylon Bee.
That is a Babylon Bee article, for sure. So, where was I in this? So 5 years ago, we all thought the Constitution was the answer. Now, not so much, because the Constitution wasn't the answer. And Stephen Wolf got right-wing watch today for saying that, the Founding Fathers made a mistake in not, recognizing Jesus in the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, but he's only said that like 1,000 times. They finally got it on. They finally clipped it.
So... And he's right that, namely the rejection of Zionism, classical liberalism, and the post-war consensus. And those are ideas that all really need to go. Just saying. They all need to go. And then he continued, speaking just for myself here, this has nothing to do with me not having the courage and resolve to muscle the ratchet back toward the right and then keep going towards wherever the red pill bros and Jew haters want to go. It's more due to the fact that I think their philosophy is bad and their arguments are bad. They have failed to convince me. My allegiance is to the truth and the good, not some mindless, endless progression rightward for its own sake. If that makes me the enemy, fine. Fight me. And if Jew-hating right ever ascends to power, the Babylon Bee will be mocking them as we mock all foolishness we see in places of power. You don't actually, again, if Jews are in power, you don't make fun of that. Just saying. You never make fun of that. You never make fun of Jews. You only make fun of Christians, Muslims, Hindu, everyone else. There's the carved out exception.
I mean, he's basically saying he's fine with the idea of gatekeeping to keep Zionism as the centerpiece of the right. And again, Zionism, aside from maybe like the gun issue, which is mainly at the state level, and maybe you could talk.
No, I think the gun issue can largely be done at the federal level, considering Reagan did.
Well, I'm talking about the actual successes.
Trump did.
I'm talking about the actual successes on issues, like on the ground level. Like the states with like
Heller versus DC was a major victory, though.
But the idea
we haven't had like federal legislation, but
and again, America just has that gun culture right on, But yeah, the only thing the Republican Party has ever done is served Israel. That's the only thing it's done. We went to Iraq for Israel. The Afghan war happened because of Zionism. Let's just be honest, cards on the table. Like, there's no way Bin Laden, who was a CIA asset, was capable of attacking us on 9/11 from a cave in Afghanistan. It's just not happening. But, we did 2 wars in the Middle East for nothing. Then we sponsored Arab Spring, which partially Obama.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that, the Taliban didn't perform 9/11, but they were what we were fighting for 20 years.
And why do we care about Ukraine?
In a different country, by the way.
But why do we care about Ukraine? Because of where a lot of people might come from. That's where their ancestry is. And then you have, the originator of woke right, I think, is Konstantin Kissin of trigonometry. So he's this British guy, but he's Russian and he is also Jewish. But his people had to flee Russia, I think, because of Putin back in the day, and that's where we get woke right from. So,
woke right comes from who?
I think Konstantin Kissin.
Okay. Let me catch up on some chat. Yurtle with the super chat. I want to thank you for that. Anyone who isn't against you is for you. And again, words of Jesus. Let me just give that a more vernacular translation. Let them cook. There's your vernacular translation. Yellow Moth said the Constitution was a smokescreen that bamboozled us for another 4 years. And even in 2022, I was still bigger on the Constitution, but I think that fell apart at the end of 2022 for me. And then Robert asked, "Are you boys ready to engage with the orthosphere?" And part of it to me is a LARP. They're not, because at the end of the day, white evangelicals are the lone bulwark on pretty much every single moral issue, and every issue is a moral issue to some extent. 50% of Catholics are Democrats, and I think that's also true for Eastern Orthodox. So
probably greater percent, but let's be honest, I'd sooner flirt with presbys than orthos.
I don't know. That's a redeemed Zoomer.
Not those presbys.
All right.
But yeah, long story short, our entire foreign policy apparatus serves one group of people. And that's the only thing the Republicans have achieved in like 20 years.
I think largely evangelicals as a political bloc have put all our eggs into the Zionism basket, and we neglected the other issues that were more meaningful.
Which is every issue.
And I have an article upcoming on this. I'm going to write about Zionism being pretty much terminal in evangelicalism. I think it's in a terminal state, because I think there's data to back that up. And there's an interesting article by Jerusalem Post on this that I want to kind of bring in. So I'm going to write that eventually. I wanted to do that this week, but it's been a pretty heavy news week with David Platt. So he says that his allegiance is to the truth. Joel Berry does, and I just don't really buy that. I think he pulls his punches.
Oh no, because he basically says that any right that is anti-Zionist is not truth.
Yes.
Which even again, Israel just being Israel neutral, which again, Israel is the number one country that is, if you're looking at who's going to start a nuclear war, they're number one on that list. That they would proactively nuke Iran or preemptively nuke Iran, which means they'd have to nuke. They'd have to make sure that Iran is totally destroyed in one shot. Otherwise, they get destroyed. Like they're the most likely candidate to launch a nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, even Russia makes a lot of threats about using nukes, but they don't need to. They're pretty much mopping up Ukraine on the battlefield.
I mean, China is not likely to. I mean, again, we talk about whether China's actually interested in attacking Taiwan, which that window is closing if they were going to do it.
Yeah, because don't they, basically the best time of year to attack Taiwan is like September.
Oh, I thought it was
September, October. Okay. But either way, the fall, because of the tides and stuff like that. And yeah, a little too late for that.
And again, after the, that missile strike
But the thing about Taiwan is no one wants to invade Taiwan, because that's kind of a hard island to invade. You're talking urban warfare, jungle warfare, and mountain warfare all on one small island. Taiwan is extremely defensible. So I think the Chinese are bluffing. They're not going to do it because democracy is cheaper than war. So there's a tag along to this tweet, and I'm not of the mind that we need to coddle our radicals like the left coddles theirs, so they can, in theory, do the difficult work of dragging the Overton window back to the right. Screw that. The truth is the truth. Lose that and you lose your soul, not to mention your sense of humor. Again,
in the words of Pontius Pilate, what is truth?
Right.
His argument is essentially, my truth is the truth. What I believe to be truth is the truth, because he doesn't actually assert what is truth, except the
Zionism, classical liberalism, and the post-war consensus. So then we got a debate about the phrase "Christ is King." So this is kind of relevant because Joel Berry goes. Not only does Joel Berry go after Joel Webbon, he goes after Aaron McIntyre.
And this was because J.D. Vance had someone in the crowd. Well, it's because of Kamala saying, "You're at the wrong rally," to someone that said "Christ is King," and then J.D. Vance played off of it. And then Aaron McIntyre is basically going everyone's celebrating Christ is King now, but where were they like several months ago? Because this would take us back to March or April.
Yeah, so to read Aaron McIntyre, respectable conservatives who lost their minds over people saying Christ is king are now attacking Harris for rejecting those who say Jesus is Lord. Succinct and to the point, but Joel Berry,
You know how to.
Joel Berry ain't having that.
And again, the dog you hit is the dog. Like the dog that yelps is the dog you hit, and
because, and this is where Joel Berry's like, because the specific phrase "Christ is King" was being used by as a Nazi rallying cry at the time, taking Christ's name in vain. Again, I don't think that was true at the time. It was being used pointedly to, distinguish Christianity from Judaism. And I have no problems with that. Many at the time wisely altered the phrase to Jesus is Lord to avoid any association with Jew hatred. You know this, yet you continue to gaslight about it. And again, that's it's interesting because Oron does respond to this tweet, and I'll highlight his response, but I'm going to let him finish first. Many of us respectable conservatives, as you call us, Oron McIntyre, say things like Jesus is Lord, Christ is Lord, and Jesus is King to avoid confusion and association with Fuentes dorks wickedly using Christ as King as a Nazi incantation. Or are you ignoring this, or are you on their side? To those grossly misunderstanding Paul's words, saying we should just be happy Christ is being preached, allow me to explain, saying Christ is King, you dirty Zionist Jew cocks, does not count as preaching Christ. Hopes that helps. Again, Christ is King, Joel Berry. Just wanted to say that.
I mean, how about we say Christ is King? Stop being a dirty,
repent.
Yeah, repent of being that.
Okay. Oron McIntyre responds, and does he get the ratio here? It's pretty tight, so I'm going to give it to him. You know perfectly well that Nick and his groypers hate me. You know I have no love for the people you were trying to silence over this. So it might be worth asking, is there a more important principle apart from factional infighting that he's trying to address here? But easier to attack my character or intelligence, I guess. You don't think Kamala and her supporters are going to claim exactly the same thing you did? That she only rejected that call for Jesus as Lord because Nazis said it? So basically, Aaron McIntyre, again, Aaron McIntyre is not a groyper. I think he's a thought leader in the dissident right, and perhaps one of the most popular.
Oh, he's not the most popular, but he is probably one of the more legitimized.
Who is?
I mean, from his subscriber count, he doesn't have like 50. Joel Webbon has more subs than Aaron.
Okay, that's fair.
But he is, if anything, he's still underrated.
In that real fast?
I want to get to the right response here. So again, conservatives attacking over Christ's King.
All you have to do.
So with that said, Joel Berry is trying to make this about, we gotta maintain the post-war consensus. We can't be doing anything that Nazis are associated with. And it's just, again, when your whole worldview centers around the post-war consensus, when you are, and this is the difference between Zionism and Christianity. Zionism treats the Holocaust as like the pinnacle of humanity. That is the climax of mankind.
It's the worst event in human history.
Worst event in human history. That is the event in which we must all look back to. We must never forget. That is the pinnacle of human history.
And then
Christianity says that the resurrection, or the crucifixion and the resurrection, those 3 days is the pinnacle of human history.
And then,
two separate worldviews.
October 7th is the second worst event in all of history.
Basically, yes.
The last event and
stuff like that.
And again, if you want to deflate the Fuentes and the groypers, literally the guy is like a closeted homosexual and perhaps even a federal agent. So
Tucker Carlson seems to think so.
Yeah, just go with that. It's like you guys are the homos following the federal agent.
Yeah,
and literally
I think
listening to them.
I think there's some credibility to those accusations. Again, I'm not a hater of Nick Fuentes' audience. I'm not a fan of Nick Fuentes, though. I haven't listened to him, but you're going to be hard pressed to get me to listen to someone that's younger than me, does not have kids, or has not held office, and doesn't have any, in my opinion, meaningful accomplishments that I can just say, hey, wow, you can really speak to this issue. Now, does he have any good ideas? Sure, I'm sure he has some good ideas, but I'm not really, he doesn't really attract me to listen to him. So those are just my thoughts. And yeah, I think the homosexuality thing, is too much for me to want to touch. But instead, you're just going with the low hanging fruit of, I'm just saying there are, the whole homosexuality thing is worse than the whole Nazi thing. Open up a Bible and see which one God thinks is worse. So the idea is that Joel Berry would eventually call Oron McIntyre evil. And this is also, there's Joel Berry and then there's also Joel Berry. And there's this tweet from Ali Stuckey and Liz Marbach, two very, pro-life. They're very passionate about this issue, especially Lizzie. And she says, and Joel Berry says, you actually know nothing about what she knew or didn't know, or whether she received ultrasounds or what education she received. This is talking about someone who got an abortion, by the way, etc. We can recognize people are without excuse while also having compassion for people who are deceived by lies. And again, literally everybody knows that people are pregnant with babies.
Yeah, sex leads to pregnancy. Is that really a surprise? I mean, I know there's people, anthropologists out there that have recorded stories from these savage tribes that are basically saying they act like they don't know what that sex produces babies or whatever, which might just be a ruse. But it's intelligent people, people in intelligent places, know that sex and pregnancy are pretty intimately connected.
I don't know if there's ever a point in human history where we didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, the only example I can think
even
of
the secular people, I don't know if there's a point where, hey, we discovered fire, but when do we discover pregnancy and how that happens? So Joel Webbon does respond also Aaron McIntyre also does respond to Seth Dillon, who weighs in on this because they're basically being liars about this. So Seth Dillon says we can and should affirm the lordship of Jesus while denouncing in strongest terms possible the disgusting abuse of his name by the Nazis posing as Christians. And Oron McIntyre responds saying, this is so dishonest, it's almost comical. From the beginning, my position was that while ethnic hatred is wrong, that the truth that Christ is king was more important. So if you want to attack ethnic hatred, do that, but don't try to censor a biblical truth. I made an entire video explaining exactly this point, though I'm sure neither Seth nor Joel bothered to watch it because it's better to argue with a straw man on Twitter than actually think through the issue. I was told repeatedly by Seth's staff members, no less, that it isn't sufficient to disagree with ethnic hatred or even criticize it. One must purge Christ as king in all existence, lest it offend the wrong people. Joel literally referred to the phrase as a Nazi incantation, but of course it isn't. It's a powerful truth, and I couldn't care less if Hitler drank water. It's still true that water is good for you. Ethnic hatred of all kinds is wrong, but I will not have my speech dictated by leftist smear tactics, and I will not play denunciation games, and I will not dance for the pleasure of malicious actors, especially ones who already know that I disagree with the people trying to associate with me. Christ is king, Jesus is Lord, and it doesn't matter if Stalin, Mao, or Mussolini all said the same thing. I would declare it because it's the truth. That principle is more important than the ugly progressive games that are being played. So lie, slander, and straw man all you like. And then he says, Joel is rabid ethno-nationalist for one state Israel. He thinks that anyone who doesn't dedicate their life to that cause is a super secret Nazi groiper, whatever. Seth seems to agree. They can't imagine having a principle greater than this and treat anyone who does as hostile. He cooked there.
Yeah,
I just want to be clear.
I mean, as Stephen Wolf would say, everyone's a theonomist on the issue they care most about, and kind of just get the connection. It's just like, yeah, he's an ethno-nationalist, where on one particular issue.
Yeah, and he is, and that's the hypocrisy. If America wants to be anything like Israel in that sort of way, and even having a robust border policy, we can't, because that's racist. And certain, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society is going to, fund a border crisis in our country. So.
Now, keep in mind, back the whole Christ King controversy was over it being spouted at specifically Ben Shapiro.
Right. And I was here for that because it's true. So even when Kamala Harris mocked the idea of Jesus as Lord at her rally, I still think that this was overall good because, hey, you got to see Kamala Harris disrespect, say the truth out loud. She said what was on her heart. And I think this was good for people to see. This is her heart. It is a Jezebel. And, for JD Vance to also, yes, Christ is king. It's true. And you got to see that contrast. You got to see, someone in politics proclaim Christ as king, their direct opponent denounce Christ and, say that Christians have no place in the Democrat Party, essentially. You got to see some good versus evil play out. And I think that's ultimately good for the nation, because it's not that we're too partisan, Matt Chandler. It's that we're actually not partisan enough. There's actually not enough difference between the two parties. So anyway, Elijah Schaffer also got involved in the fight. Former Blaze contributor, among other things. Seth Dillon blocked me for not replying to his DMs fast enough. Lol. What was this over? The phrase Christ is king. Crazy how sensitive these types get about a simple biblical phrase. Still not sure how or why this is controversial. And that seems to be the end of my live stream fodder. So your thoughts on that? That kind of catches us up for the most part.
I mean, keep in mind, like 2024, if anything, is kind of like I don't say the immolation of Nick Fuentes, but I mean, if you actually are following even from a tertiary level, what Fuentes has been up to, he's literally trying to encourage his supporters not to vote for Trump in key swing states and literally to vote for Kamala Harris. So, I mean, he is going into irrelevance, I think. His brand is on the decline. I mean, in certain conversations I've had, it's said that he's one of those guys taking that Arab money, or perhaps going more towards that Arab audience, which is why he's cozied up to, well, not just, cozy TV, but he's cozied up with the Islam.
Kick? What's behind Kick? The streaming platform.
Wasn't there a Jewish billionaire or millionaire that signed him or something?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I don't quite know that story. But yeah, he would, I don't think his brand has actually increased this year. If anything, I think he's kind of self-immolated himself a lot.
I got a meme for tonight, though. Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. See the whole thing?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, y'all know I'm a big fan of SpongeBob memes. So this one definitely comes from the iconic episode of Squilliam. He says, Squidward's. Oh, wait, what? That's not it. Okay. Anyway, never mind. Let me change my tab here. Anyway, there's a meme that I posted.
It's a good meme template.
This is the meme.
Oh.
Here we go. Here we go. Don't be intimidated, Squidward. Just try to imagine him in his underwear. And it's like Joel, and he's ripped. And it's like, oh no, he's hot. I just love that scene. SpongeBob's great because the dialogue's at an adult level, but the situations are at a child's level. So there's that great, humor that all ages can enjoy in these early seasons. But Joel Webbon's face on top of Squilliam, and he's just ripped. Just try to imagine him in his underwear. It is like he's hot, and that makes it even worse. But that's what Joel Webbon's doing right now. He is living rent free in these people's heads, and they can't handle it. So, while we're wrapping up, let's do a last call for questions. I do see some questions in the chat. Got any jokes?
I already gave you the Kamala Harris 5 guys joke. That's
let's see. So you're asking him a question, but it's like, how can one surprise the first ones? I don't quite get that. Oh, I honestly, I think Adam and Eve, just to weigh in on, did Adam and Eve know that sex leads to pregnancy? I think they knew because of animals. The rabbit has a quicker gestation cycle than the human or the guinea pig.
I mean, they were both naked in the garden. But
I think God gave humans like intrinsic knowledge. Like we had language. God created us with language. We did not develop spoken language on our own. God gave that to us. And I think certain knowledge we were implanted with. And I think that's just one of them. That's my big anthropological theory.
Well, I mean, the whole, the law in our hearts was written from creation. So
question for Evangelical Dark Web. Are you familiar with theophanies? So I know the term Christophany refers to appearance of Jesus in the Old and or New Testament, the apparitions that Jesus, had on the way to Damascus via Paul. Like that's believed, that's a Christophany. People also believe that a lot of partial preterists naturally would believe that Christ made a Christophany at AD 70 in Jerusalem. Theophany, would that just entail God the Father?
I think it would just entail the Father. Though the question could be for both, but so we're talking what? The burning bush.
Moses seeing the face of God and him shining afterwards. Wouldn't that be a theophany?
Yeah, Sinai in general.
So I am familiar with theophanies.
I don't know how to play off the question unless we want to,
Theo vis-a-vis Trinity. Yeah. I'm not sure where to take the question from here. But, the different parts of the Trinity making appearances. I mean, we do see that in Scripture. The Holy Spirit at the baptism of Christ. So that, there's definitely a lot of appearances of Jesus in the Old Testament. And I'm trying to remember what the first appearance was. I do think it was before Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Yeah, one of the angels is addressed as Lord.
But that angel does not go into the city and is not threatened with sodomy. And that, to me, was a Christophany.
I mean, yeah, that's the interpretation, the common interpretation, because the angel is addressed as Lord.
So Robert asks, who's paying y'all? I mean, we're pretty independently supported. There's YouTube money. There's Google AdSense money, but and then there's people that are subscribers at Evangelical Dark Web. That's our patron-like system or Patreon-like system, but it's really our patron system. It gives you benefits and stuff like that.
Elon Musk is really helping me out with his
yet to see
that Tesla stock performance today. Yeah, that was helping me out.
I've yet to see any of the money from the book yet. I think everything just gets delayed with these types of things. Like YouTube doesn't give you any money until the 21st of the next month. So I could make $1 million on one video the 1st of October, and I wouldn't see it till the 21st of November. which I think is ridiculous. Oh, and then there's the podcast, which makes a few dollars. Again, so yeah, I don't have backers other than the people who are backing, but there's no investor or anything like that. I guess I'm just not popular enough. But anyway, I try to be transparent and inside baseball about these kinds of things. It also helps, my understanding of where I'm at with assessing like where other people are at in a way. I can say, hey, this person, what was it, Cameron Bertuzzi, when he was doing fundraisers because he wasn't making enough money? It's like, well, odds are he's not. You need, say, X amount of subscribers. Like, you need 6-figure subscribers to make money solely on YouTube through YouTube advertisement. You probably need 6 figures of subscriptions. But you can supplement that with Patreon and other platforms like that, YouTube memberships and stuff like that. So I'm rambling, but it's like all this kind of knowledge that you kind of learn doing it at a smaller scale and stuff like that. But YouTube ads do compound. I've learned that recently as well. So do we start with the Trinity theologically? Let's see. He first revealed the nature. Let first understand the nature of God as he reveals himself. Question, can he spell Delaware? Isn't that answered in the question? All right. Well, anyway, that seems to be all our questions for tonight. I did mention the Patreon-like system. You can definitely support us over at patreon.org/join, and that's linked in the description below. Until then, have a blessed